Hey guys, we are in day 148 in our Bible reading plan, 1 Samuel 19 through 21 and Psalm 147. This is like a movie. I know you like the story of David, but reading it and trying to think through, communicating it to you just highlights and reinforces the difficulty of how life in general. So today's big idea is that just because you're being attacked in the very area God has called you to does not lessen God's call on your life, but rather reinforces it. If I were to interpret David's life from a human perspective, I'd be like, maybe this isn't what God wants me to do, because he's the anointed king, he's been called to be king, but the king is after him. He's trying to be murdered multiple times in the story. In fact, I think it's 16 times Saul tries to kill David. And at some point, you might think David would have given up. In fact, it gets so bad, by the end of our reading for today, he flees. He goes over to Nob, where Ahimelech the priest is. And later in the New Testament, when Jesus is accused of breaking the Sabbath, he refers to this incident where David actually eats the bread, the holy bread, and takes the army, the sword of Goliath, and both are symbolic of the bread of life, Jesus, and God fighting for us, the armor. But it's crazy because he doesn't quit. He understands that this is part of the plan, and I wish we were to understand it the same way. But Saul, meanwhile, every single time he wants to kill David, it's after a big victory that David has. It's out of jealousy and self-protection. The interesting aspect here is that Jonathan, who's the rightful heir, humanly speaking, of Saul, who, by the way, think of him as a fatherly figure with David. He loves David like his own. He just has, there's a really dear friendship there. And so he's watching out for David. And Jonathan understands that God has chosen David to take the throne. So even though normally he would fight for what's his own, what he does is tell David in chapter 20, listen, you make me a promise, a covenant that you will not kill my own line, my family, my son, and that will come back later. And another interesting little thing in chapter 19, Michal, the wife of David, who, by the way, Saul broke his promise, did not give a wife to David right after he beat Goliath, but later on had given a Michal to be a snare to him. But instead of being a snare, she's the one who ends up saving David's life. And we see another incident here where, despite the fact that she lies to Saul, God uses her to save the life of David. I found another thing that I hadn't noticed before, by the way, in when David flees in chapter 19, he goes to Ramah and hangs out with Samuel for a while. I'd forgotten about Samuel. He'd given his farewell speech, and then Saul comes, and Saul does not meet with Samuel, but I just thought that was like a little interesting tidbit. All right, go back. Let's end with chapter 21. A little footnote. Doeg, the Edomite, he will come back to haunt David, sadly, but he's there in that chapter. And then David flees to Gath of the Philistines, and he acts like a crazy madman. Was it out of fear, self-preservation? I don't know. He was under a lot of pressure, and sometimes even when we know it's God's will for our life, the things that come out of us don't always reflect 100% trust. But David is afraid, he's on the run, and we're going to see what happens to him in the next chapter when we come back tomorrow. But for now, understand that no matter how heavy the attack, David still God is anointed. He still is a man after God's own heart, and God has a plan for his life, and he does for you too. Love you guys.